Last year was like a breakthrough year for us. We grew 13 times last year in terms of volume sent and revenue. We had 10, partners or customers. Right now we have over 30.
All right, Enrique, great to have you back here. Just a quick update. I've got Enrique Perezalonso with us, who is the founder and CEO of Palla, a startup that has recently raised their Series A. They went through Y Combinator. They've got some great investors. And the last time we spoke, there was a lot of growing and building going on. So before we jump in, Enrique, how you doing?
Doing pretty good. I can't complain. We just completed our Series A, which, as you know, it's a full-time job in and of itself. So we're really glad to be able to get heads down and start working on the business again. So everything's good, Jake.
When I started this podcast, I had this vision to go behind the scenes to share what it's like to be a startup founder in Silicon Valley, where I'm born and raised. And weekly, we dive deep in the trenches to find the wins, the losses, and the lessons learned, with the hopes that it helps you run a better startup. But here's the thing. If you've gotten any value out of these conversations or been inspired at all, hit the subscribe button. And I get it. Your podcast feed's probably overflowing. But to stay up to date with what's going on in Silicon Valley, stick with us. Because at the end of the day, we're all just trying to build something that matters. And we're better when we do it together. So hit that subscribe button and follow us wherever you find your podcasts. Now, let's get back to the show. All right. Well, where we left off last time, you raised a seed round and had an extension round. And I think you had 9 employees at the time. You had 10 companies that were like established clients, and you had, a lot of growth ahead of you. You were looking to continue to build your company. But for the listeners, just to give them a recap, you are a platform infrastructure that helps financial institutions or fintech companies do remittance or transfer funds from the US to South America or globally. And from our last conversation, it's a large, significant growth market that's continuing to increase. Give us a little snapshot of where the company is today in terms of growth, in terms of employees, in terms of just the industry.
So happy. Happy to start with the company and to report that yes, last year was like a breakthrough year for us, and I think that's what allowed us to be able to go out to marketing and do the Series A. We grew 13 times last year in terms of volume sent and revenue, and so very exciting. You mentioned we had 10 partners or customers. Right now we have over 30.
Wow.
Mostly financial institutions in Latam and in the US that are integrated. We are an embedded platform, so we live within their digital ecosystems. So in terms of the team, we were 9. Right now we're 16 and growing. So it's very exciting. We are currently planning on expanding. As you remember, we were only doing the US to LATAM corridor because it's one of the largest corridors in the world, right? It's 66 billion just to Mexico alone. You're talking about around 160, almost 170 billion sent from the US to the whole LATAM. And that's kind of been our focus, but there's also a lot of money coming from Europe to Latin America. So we're focusing on expanding our operation, being able to originate transactions from Europe to LATAM as well. And we are looking at other corridors, but for the time being, that's our focus, expanding also the type of rails that we use so we can continue to deliver funds real time and doing things better. That's what's really exciting, that there's so many opportunities, even within what we are already doing. Because as you know, when you're a startup, you have to be efficient. You have to take care of that. You don't go overboard with the costs. And a lot of what you're doing still operates on MVP level. So it's great to be able to bring on more people who are probably going to start looking at things with a microscope and improving them. So that's really exciting.
Yeah. Well, I love your story. There's, companies that were born during the pandemic. You were one of them. And you have a certain set of rules, which are I can't hire anyone that's local, that's in an office, because there is no offices. So you can go remote. You talked about, hiring people that you knew so that you understood what they could deliver when you hired them. As you continue to grow, you have to start taking chances of people you don't know, but maybe people that are working for you do know. What's your sort of strategy around continuing to grow and scale and bringing the right people in, but making sure you're mindful of who you're going to get when you make that decision?
Sure. So we're big believers in taking it slow when we're hiring and making sure we're not just filling bodies. Because
Yeah.
I think that's when you have the pressure to grow and to fill you need a function that needs to get filled immediately. There's a big pressure to just grab the first person who kind of meets a requirement, and that can be a big mistake, we think. So of course we still give preference to people we've worked for with in the past. We still give preference to people we know of, like can get that people can recommend, like in our immediate circle. But we also know that's not always the case. So we've gotten lucky. I think we've started hiring a few new positions which we didn't know. And what we did is just be very rigorous around the hiring process and trying to get references and talking to people who know them and talking to them, not just one interview and saying, okay, you're hired, but many interviews, and trying to know that person. Because ultimately it's about a couple things. And for me, the two most important ones that come to mind are the number one, the cultural fit, right? That's going to be key. And will this person be, even though they might be an excellent technical resource, will their personality clash with the rest of the team? And that's very important. That can cause a lot of disruption, especially in a small company like us. So we put a lot of attention to that. And then there's like, hey, can they do the job part, which is, you know there's hey, do they have the knowledge component, but you also need, hey, do they want to learn? Are they adaptable? Are they willing to grow? And that's really what you're looking for, people who have that go-getter attitude, that have that that want to grow professionally, personally, and they're willing to take a risk, because ultimately going to work for a startup is a big risk for for anyone. So you have to believe in what the company is doing, and you have to believe that team can take it to the next level, and that you can be successful in that environment.
Yeah, I love that. I love those words you used, adaptability. I think it's so important for any employee, any leader, really, as the markets change, as the economy changes, as the president changes. There's all sorts of variables you got to work through and figure out how do you adapt and succeed. The market you're in, I think, is incredible because you're talking about, one out of five people, and I think this is specific to Latam, that
Yeah.
money is sent from here to somebody outside the borders. If that those numbers continuing to grow, it's a very scalable market. And if you're a player in that space, it's easy, you would think, to get investors excited about what you're building and the problem you're solving. When we talked last time, you said, it's hard to teach an old dog new tricks. You've been in the business a long time, 20 years, and this is, a startup that you're, getting off the ground. Now it's way off the ground, 4.5 million in a Series A funding. And, looking at going through a Y Combinator, you were saying that experience was incredible. It was like the Harvard education for a founder, because you not just understand how to build a business, but the network you can create, the badge of honor you wear, and opening doors really helps too. So a lot of things can come out of that. But I think the thing that you left me with, which was the maybe hit me the most, was, God gives you the strength, and I'm going to probably not say this accurately, but God gives you the strength to have the patience to go through the things that you cannot change. Or in other words, you're not always going to get what you want when you want it. So give me the strength to figure out how to get through this and overcome it. I think that's so important to realize and keep in mind as a startup founder, that you're trying to build a business. You've got pressure, you want to scale, you have investors that are looking at what you're doing, and you have to navigate that process. I recently heard that, if you don't have problems, you don't have a business. Hopefully you have the right kind of problems, but you don't want too many of the others. But from your perspective, you've really navigated this from the pandemic into where you're at today. Talk a little bit about the fundraising, because the market is in some ways good and for other companies not so good. So what did you learn when you started the process and it became really your full focus to getting the funding, and now where you're at today?
Sure. So first thing, I think the first thing that comes to mind is that the environment has changed significantly since we did our seed round. We did our seed round in 2021. All the markets were frothy. investors were really, backing. You could come up with many ideas and you would find an investor that will back you. That's a reality. And as you know, markets have now tightened. That's a reality. I think, at least for last year, they just became much more difficult. And the other key thing is that when you're talking about a seed round, the stakes are not as high. You're not raising as much money. So there's a bunch of investors who are willing to get in on the ground floor, but maybe you have more leeway. Let's call it more leeway in terms of what you can do, the time you have to get your product to market, the expectations. On the Series A, that like the expectation is you have a company that's already working and that can be expanded significantly. So that's really what you're trying to convey to the investors. And it is a harder process because of that, because of those expectations, because a lot of investors, they have different theses in terms of what they want to invest in, the size of the company, the industry. So I'd say that it was a harder process from what we had gone through in the past. But in other ways, it was very enriching too. Learned a lot. We can each I feel like it's another one of those big mile markers in the road that you can say, hey, I was able to achieve this. And it's really a badge of honor, not just for me but for the whole team, because we really have been able to create a business that is, it's growing significantly. It's creating value for partners, customers, our team, our investors. And and that's really ultimately what it's about, right? But yeah, I'd say that it was a long process, but we're glad to be done. But we're very happy with the end result. We have a great group of investors, very involved, and we think they're going to be, very, a great team. We're going to make a great team with them to take this company to the next level.
Yeah. You know, you oftentimes get investors that bring different value to the table. It could be opening doors in a specific market, or maybe strategy, or maybe they might be a company that would acquire a company that they invest in at some point. What's been a surprising partner investor that's part of your team now that you're excited about? Not to put one over the other, but like what's one that you're really excited they were part of the process?
I'd say the leader in our round was Revolution Ventures. And, they're very detail oriented. They get very much in the weeds. And I just love the new board dynamic that we're creating. We have David Golden, who's one of the partners in Revolution Ventures, and also Heidi Miller, she used to lead JP Morgan International. She used to be the head of JP Morgan International for a while. So, you don't get that caliber of people in your board so you can bounce ideas and kind of, add value on a day-to-day basis that often. We're excited because people with real world and experience and contacts, and who can, lift up the phone, make intros, make connections. So that's really great to have. I'd say that's something that makes us really excited. And, I think that going forward, it's really going to help us, achieve our goals.
Yeah. Exciting. Yeah, it's a great company. In terms of the investment, you have it now. Usually it's, you put the funds into, systems or strategy or people or, acquisitions. When you look at this new round of funding, where are you looking to make your first big hit with it?
Oh, great question. So number one, like I said, there's a couple processes, and there's in functions within the company that we had at let's call it at an MVP level. So like a very basic level, and we need to make sure we're doing that really well. Just to give you an example, just the finance, let's say the finance function, right? I've been managing that since since day one, but we've gotten to a point where we need, if not a CFO, but a finance manager or someone who can really dive into the numbers and do that day in, day out. And as what I've, your role changes every day, right? In a startup and as a CEO, I've realized, hey, my role needs to be not so much about being in the weeds and the numbers, but really being in front of customers, being in front of the partnerships, which is something that is, being more and more demanding of me. So that's kind of where what drives a lot of the change in the organization and the hires is, hey, where can I add more value, and what are things that I can delegate now, especially now that we have the resources and we're growing very fast. And that drives a lot of it. So that would be one thing in terms of the investments. The other big investments, of course, is what are the big opportunities that we can capture. And certainly one of them is to open up new corridors. And that requires investing in teams, investing in licensing, investing in infrastructure in other countries so that we can start serving, the markets where we're at from other geographies. And that's really what we're looking into right now. And hopefully, pretty soon we'll be able to give you good news about new markets that we're serving and new corridors.
Yeah, really exciting. You talked a little bit about an idea. I don't know if you went down this path, but it was also about not just aligning with banks and financial institutions and fintech companies, but potentially also aligning with companies that could do the payments to their international contractors or,
Right.
people. And where has that continued, or where is that part of the business?
That part hasn't, that part is still going on. So it hasn't grown as fast. I think what's happened is that the kind of like the payments, the embedded person to person payments has grown so fast that we really kept this, still in the incubation, period, or
Yeah.
incubation stage. Now that we have the resources, I think that's something we're starting to pay a little bit more attention. There's a big demand for it. So we want to make sure we have the right product and the right go-to-market strategy, though. So that's why we, before the round, we were so focused on just the day-to-day growth that we were seeing on our traditional product. That's something that it was just growing organically without a lot of help from us, and it was doing okay, but not at the same level as the other one. And now that we've finalized the round, this is something precisely that we're trying to look at more carefully. How can we improve that? How can we make it easier for companies? For example, maybe like someone like yourself that might have a sound
Yeah.
engineer or a producer or someone who's doing post production in Colombia or Mexico or wherever. How can you pay those teams without having to go to the bank and make a wire transfer? So just make it really easy, and that's what we're working on as well.
Yeah. Well, there's a ton of opportunities there, and like the content creator communities where there's a huge growth there. And yeah, everyone's looking for systems, and everyone's looking to keep their costs down as they go and grow and build. So if you've got something that works well, good to know when it's available, and happy to share it.
Absolutely,
And use.
absolutely. You'll be the first one. We'll let you know. In fact, if you want to try our MVP, happy to talk afterwards.
Yeah, very cool. That's great. Well, as you continue to evolve as a company, obviously you have to evolve as a person and as a leader. It sounds like you're pulling back and letting, other people run different parts of the business from finance and maybe other areas. When you look at growing, you talk a little bit about, the pandemic starting and everyone's remote and distributed. Do you see that as a model that's continued to work for you, or you looking to bring everyone together at some point?
So I don't think we're ever going to bring everyone together, just because one of the things we've done is kind of grow. Half of our team is in the US, some other, like the other half is in Latin America. We just because it makes sense that a lot of our partners are in the region, so it's good to have them there. So right out of the gate, it's that maybe is not going to be feasible to have them in one central location. I do think, and I know that eventually there's a limit, right, to what you can do with remote, because if you're hiring younger people, they might not get the same kind of coaching and learning opportunities that if they were in an office. Like, if think about it, if you're like 20 and you're right out of college, it's not the same thing. You have to be with your peers, with your you have opportunities to get mentorship, to learn. And we do eventually want to provide those opportunities. And the same thing, I would say that there's a lot of benefits to being in the same place and just being able to, just even from a personal level, right? So it's worked really well up to now because it's manageable. We're still 15 people every week. Everyone gets, we all get together on the screen, of course, and we all talk about what the company is doing and what the goals are. However, I think eventually it's, and we're far from that yet, but it will come a point where we will need to have some operational centers. That's the way that I'm envisioning it. It might change, so you don't quote me, but that's how I see it today. Where we people can come together maybe a couple times a week, and for sure we're gonna have one in Mexico City or Latam, and then another one probably here in Florida, and that's where I think we are headed because I hope, or not hope, but I wish I could tell you that remote, you could grow to 100 people remote, but I think at some point there's a limit to it, and I don't know exactly where it is, but I think we eventually every company hits it, especially every company that's born like us in the pandemic, and that's 100% remote.
Yeah, yeah, makes total sense. Well, you started off remote. It sounds like you got some runway to continue to do that. But I do agree that, the education you can get by rubbing shoulders with your, current employees and your friends, it does go quite a ways, especially if it's younger employees with paired with an older employee or more tenured. It's just that transfer of knowledge happens, more than you know. So I think it's at some points important. But really excited that we were able to reconnect here and have you back on. I know that there's a lot of companies that are raising capital today, and in the AI space is a little bit different, where you have different breakthroughs that are making it in some ways maybe easier to raise capital. But for an organization like yours, as we end here, just from if you think about AI, how does that impact your company? I'm just curious to know, is it integrated? Is there any level of technology in there, or is it utilizing tools that are helping you operate your company differently?
So I think that there's AI. I'd say that over the past 2 years has really become enmeshed in the day to day of what we do. Not necessarily in the way that you might think. Like, for example, we don't have any processes run by AI. We don't have, but we do have, for example, on the engineering side, there's tools that just make engineers' lives so much easier,
Yeah.
much more efficient. And then I'm going to talk about myself, but I think a lot of my colleagues and coworkers kind of share this, is the AI just makes you so much more efficient. It replaces a lot of going back and forth in terms of searching for things, reading things. It really makes you go faster. So
Yeah.
without saying, hey, it's embedded in our platform, and
Hmm.
because of course we're not, an AI platform, so to speak, we're a money movement platform, but I'd say that it is embedded in our daily workflow. If you're researching something, hey, you're probably going to use AI. If you are writing something and you just want to double check it, or just maybe increase the size of the text a little bit, you will use AI. And that's where I think that we start to see it more. So I do think it's going to continue for sure. It's going to continue to be a part of, not just professionally but personally in our daily lives. I think that's something that's here to stay, and that's going to take have a big presence in our lives.
Yeah,
That's
we're seeing that too. Any product names that you think of that have been most effective for you or your company? Because there's so many tools out there in AI. You got for the developers, I know there's Cursor and a number of other companies, Copilots,
yeah.
but for sales or for marketing, has there been anything that's really you've seen help accelerate your execution on anything?
I'd say on the engineering team, you said it, Cursor, Copilot. Those are the big ones, of course, in that space. I wouldn't say we have a specific tool that's helped us. I think, of course, we have ChatGPT, you have Grok, you have Perplexity,
Mhm.
and I know the team uses it for different things, of course.
Yeah.
But I'm just waiting, excited about it, waiting to see what else comes up and how we can really start integrating it more in the workflow and into the operational systems and making our lives more efficient. Because ultimately, it's not like it's going to take your job away, or at least that's my vision, but it's going to make you so much more efficient that you might not end up hiring one person that's probably going to be able to do the job that five people did in the past, or
Right.
three people did in the past. So it's I think we're in the midst of a little bit of industrial revolution. So it
Yeah,
is going to change the way people work and the functions they do and how they do those functions.
it's wild. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's keeping. I mean, we're seeing companies right now that are not hiring people unless they have AI tool experience. Whether you're a developer, how much coding you're doing, if you're doing more than a certain amount of coding yourself, then, you're probably not thinking the way that we want to be hiring people. On the marketing side, what tools are you using? Go into details about how it was a benefit for you. Sales, like it's starting to hit every single operational aspect of a company. So it's good to see that you guys are right in the middle of it. Can't wait to catch up with you on the next one. If there's any roles or any positions that you're hiring for that you want to plug and throw out there,
love it.
feel free
Yeah.
to mention anything.
So we are actually looking for a finance manager who can actually help us with all the models, all the analytics, of course, unit economics, kind of customer retention, all that good stuff, and who can also, hold their own in terms of accounting and bookkeeping. Not that they would do it, but we're looking for a well-rounded person who can help us with that. And that's been a challenge. I'll say that it's been a challenge. A lot of good people out there, and it's hard to sift through all the applicants. I'd say that's probably one thing where AI could be interesting if we could find the right tool that helps us match kind of the right experience and the right culture. That would be really interesting.
Yeah, got it. Well, ironically enough, we rolled out AI agents in 2024, and really what it's done is it's helped accelerate the communication between us and our customers. So we basically have an LLM that takes what you're telling us you need, and then we put it in the system, and then we send you. We do a kickoff call, and we understand what you're sharing with us, and then we say, okay, here's what we think you're saying,
Yeah,
and we put it in the system, and then it kind of trains itself up. And then we send candidates, you review them, they come back, they're a fit, they're not a fit. Ultimately, it's getting smarter and smarter. So you no longer need to tell us more than once what you need. And as you provide feedback and we provide feedback, now we kind of think like you think. And it's really accelerated not just how we operate, but also the delivery of the candidates that our clients want without a lot of frustrations of going back and forth. I've told you this 3 or 4 times. Do you understand what I'm at? It
right,
starts to
right,
take
right.
your energy and your time, and ultimately it's not very fun. So that's how we actually built that, and we're using it, and it's really been fascinating to see how the technology has helped us also evolve in the process. So but we will certainly we'll get this posted in the next 30 days or sooner, so you'll be able to get hopefully some visibility and people can connect with you directly. Enrique, where do they go again if they want to find Paya or find you?
Well, you can always just go to paya.com and you can see what we do. Or if you want to get in touch with me, you can always write me directly at enrique@paya.com. That's as easy as that.
Okay. If you get flooded, don't blame us, but we'll definitely get people to
I'm
to
fine.
connect.
I'm fine with that. I'd love to get good candidates.
Perfect. All right. Well, thank you so much for joining. I really appreciate your time, Enrique. Excited to see where things go. And for the listeners, again, for listening, hopefully this was a good catch up for you as well. I'm your host, Jake and Villarreal, signing off for now, but can't wait to catch up with you on the next episode. Until then, Enrique, the world, take care. If you like what we're doing, don't forget to subscribe. Leave a review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen. Follow us on YouTube, where we go behind the scenes to learn what it takes to be a startup founder.